Shout unto Yah with the voice of triumph, brothers and sisters. Tahalim 42, I think 47. And we can shout unto him with triumph because we know that in him we win. We always win in him. When we learn to have peace in every situation because we have come to know that he is always with us. And the battle's not ours, that is his. Today we are going to be talking about betrayal. Reading in Jasher, chapter 11, beginning with verse 13. In the 50th year of the life of Abram, son of Terah, came forth from the house of Noah and went to his father's house. So the book of Jasher tells us that, and maybe the book of Jubilee also tells us that Abram actually lived with Noah for a little while. So he's 50 years old and he comes back to his father's house. And Abram knew YAHUAH, and that makes sense, right? If he was living with Noah, he'd come to know YAHUAH, and he went in YAHUAH's ways and his instructions. And YAHUAH, his Eluah, was with him. And Terah, his father, was in those days still captain of the host of King Nimrod, and he still followed strange mighty ones. And Abram came to his father's house and saw 12 idols standing there in their temples. And the anger of Abram was kindled when he saw these images in his father's house. And Abram said, as YAHUAH lives, these images shall not remain in my father's house. So shall YAHUAH, who created me, do unto me, if in 3 days' time I do not break them all. When Abram saw all these things, his anger was kindled against his father, and he hastened and took a hatchet in his hand and came into the chamber of the mighty ones, and he broke all his father's idols. Before he did that, he had like a conversation with them also. So you'll have to read it in Jasher 11. Yeah. Oh, it kind of reminded me of when Elijah was asking the prophets of Baal, where's your mighty one? Is he gone on a trip? Is he this? Is he that? So Abram did the same thing with those idols. And he found Terah, came back from wherever he was at, and he found Abram, his son, sitting in the house. And he said to him, what is this work you have done to my mighty ones? And Terah, seeing all that Abram had done, hastened to go from his house, and he went to the king, and he came before Nimrod and stood before him, and he bowed down to the king, and the king said, what do you want? And he said, I beseech you, my master, to hear me. Now 50 years back a child was born to me, and thus has he done to my mighty ones, and thus has he spoken. And now therefore, my master and king, send for him, and he may come before you, and judge him according to the law, that we may be delivered from his evil. You know, that's where we're at. They're devising more and more laws, and that's going to be another message that we'll have to talk about. But they're devising laws that are going to trap up true followers of YAHUAH. So he wants them judged by the law. And the king sent 3 men of his servants, and they went and brought Abram before the king. And Nimrod and all his princes and servants were that day sitting before him, and Terah sat also before them. And the king said to Abram, what is this that you have done to your father and to his mighty ones? And Abram answered the king in the words that he spoke to his father, and he said, the large mighty one that was with them in the house did to them what you have heard. And the king said to Abram, had they power to speak and eat and do as you have said? And Abram answered the king, saying, and if there be no power in them, why do you serve them and cause the sons of men to err through your follies? So in other words, he was playing with them, saying, oh no, the large one is the one who hatched them up, not me. And Nimrod pretty much told on himself and said, do they have the power to do that? And so then Abram comes back with, well, if you know they can't do that, why do you serve them and cause other people to serve them? Why will you not serve YAHUAH, since that he's the mighty one, the almighty one of the whole universe, who created you and in whose power it is still to kill and keep alive? O foolish, simple, and ignorant king, woe to you forever. Okay, so now I'm going to go to chapter 12. You'll really have to read it all, okay, because it's too long for me to read it all. So chapter 12, verse 1. And the king heard the words of Abram, and he ordered him to be put into prison. Abram was 10 days in prison. Sounds familiar. Yahushua said in his own 3 that they were going to be putting some of us in prison for 10 days. And at the end of those days, the king ordered that all the kings, princes, and governors of different provinces and the sages should come before him. And they sat before him, and Abram was still in the house of confinement. And the king said to the princes and sages, have you heard what Abram, the son of Terah, has done to his father and to his mighty ones? Thus has he done to him, and I ordered him to be brought before me, and thus has he spoken. His heart did not misgive him, neither did he stir in my presence. So he's, in other words, he didn't change his story. And behold, now he is confined in the prison. And therefore decide what judgment is due to this man who reviled the king, who spoke and did all the things that you heard. That's another thing. You notice that the 3 Hebrew brothers, now Abram and anyone else who stands before these kings, they don't mince their words. And that's why Yahushua told us that when they take us before these rulers, not to think beforehand what we're going to say, but he will give us what to say. So they stand before these men in boldness, with boldness and courage, right? They're courageous. And they all answered the king, saying, the man who reviles the king should be hanged upon a tree. But having done all the things that he said, and having despised our mighty ones, he must therefore be burned to death. For this is the law in this matter. If it pleases the king to do this, let him order his servants to kindle a fire both day and night in your brick furnace, and then we will throw this man into it. And the king did so. He commanded his servants that they should prepare a fire for 3 days and 3 nights in the king's furnace, that is in Casdim. And the king ordered them to take Abram from prison and bring him out to be burned. And all the king's servants, princes, leaders, governors, and judges, and all the inhabitants of the land, about 900,000 men, stood opposite the furnace to see Abram. And all the women and little ones crowded upon the roofs and towers to see what was done with Abram. And they all stood together at a distance. And there was not a man left that did not come on that day to behold the scene. When Abram was come, the conjurers of the king and the sages saw Abram, and they cried out to the king, saying, our sovereign master, surely this is the man whom we know to have been the child at whose birth the great star swallowed the 4 stars, that we declared to the king now 50 years since. And behold, now his father has also transgressed your commands and mocked you by bringing you another child that you killed. So what happened when Abram was born? The sages and everybody who had come to the birth of the child saw how brilliant Abram was. And so they went to the king and told him pretty much that there's a special child being born, almost like a king. And when Nimrod called Terah to him, he wanted him to bring the baby to him, but Terah knew he was going to kill the baby. So he brought a handmaiden's baby to Nimrod, and Nimrod smashed him against the wall and killed the baby. So now 50 years later, the sages recognized Abram. So he still had that brilliance on his face. He still was, it was just very obvious who he was. And the sages remembered and they declared it. And when the king heard their words, he was exceedingly angry and ordered Terah to be brought before him. And the king said, have you heard what the conjurers have spoken? Now tell me truly, did you do this? And if you speak truth, you shall be acquitted. And seeing that the king's anger was so much kindled, Terah said to the king, my master and king, you have heard the truth. and what the sages have spoken is right. And the king said, how could you do this thing, to transgress my orders, and to give me a child that you did not beget, and to take value for him? So I guess Terah must have gotten some payment for turning him in. Isn't that something? And Terah answered the king, because my tender feelings were excited for my son at that time, and I took a son of my handmaid, and I brought him to the king. And the king asked, who advised you to do this? Tell me, do not hide aught from me, and then you shall not die. And Terah was greatly terrified in the king's presence. And he said to the king, it was Haran, my eldest son, who advised me to this. And Haran was 32 years old when Abram was born. Wow. But Haran did not advise his father to anything, for Terah said this to the king in order to deliver his soul from the king, for he feared greatly. And the king said to Terah, Haran, your son, who advised you to this, shall die through fire with Abram. Now he don't betray two sons. Oh my goodness, lied on one. So he said, Haran, your son, who advised you this, shall die through fire with Abraham, for the sentence of death is upon him for having rebelled against the king's desire in doing this thing. And Haran at that time felt inclined to follow the ways of Abram. So Haran was starting to believe like Abram in the Most High, YAHUAH. But he kept it within himself. And Haran said in his heart, behold, now the king has seized Abram on account of these things that Abram did. And it shall come to pass that if Abram prevail over the king, I will follow him. But if the king prevail, I will go after the king. So this is before Haran was called. And he was going to wait and see if Abram was going to survive the fire. And if he did, he would know that YAHUAH was the great one, and he was going to follow him. But if Abram died in the fire, he was going to go after the king. And when Terah had spoken this to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram. And they brought them both, Abram and Haran his brother, to throw them into the fire. And all the inhabitants of the land, and the king's servants and princes, and all the women and little ones were there standing that day over them. And the king's servants took Abram and his brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes, excepting their lower garments that were upon them. And they bound their hands and their feet with linen cords. And the servants of the king lifted them up and threw them both into the furnace. Sounds familiar, right? Matthew 24, verse 7. And nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you. And you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. So I would say that even some who may be in this way right now, walking this way, may even betray us. Because as we know, in everything, every walk of life, there's always levels of people in their commitment, their level of commitment and being sold out. Haran, look, he was beginning to believe in YAHUAH, but it was conditionally. Matthew 10, verse 16. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to councils, and they will scourge you. They're going to beat you in their synagogues. They're going to beat us in the synagogues, places of worship. And you shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them in the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, take no thought how or what you shall speak. For it shall be given you in that same hour what to speak. For it is not you that speak, but the Ruach of your Father who speaks in you. And the brother shall deliver up the brother to death, and the father the child, and the children shall rise up against their parents, and cause them to be put to death. And you shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. but he that endures to the end shall be saved. Mark 13, beginning with verse 11. But when they shall lead you and deliver you up, take no thought beforehand what you shall speak, neither do you premeditate, but whatever shall be given you in that hour, that speak you. For it is not you that speak, but the YAHUAH HaKadosh. Now the brother shall betray the brother to death, the father and the son and children shall rise up against their parents, and shall cause them to be put to death. And you shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. That's why it's going to be a testimony against them. Because the words that are spoken against them will be likened unto Stephen. Well, Stephen spoke by the Ruach as they were stoning him as a testimony. How many do you think walked away changing their lives after hearing what he had to say? And it doesn't matter if they do or not. It's still going to be, they're not going to be able to say, I never knew, when they stand before YAHUAH for the murder of his people. Luke 21, verse 11, and great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines and pestilence, and fearful sights and great signs shall there be in the Shamayim. For before all these, they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. And they shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what you shall answer. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom, that all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. And ye shall be betrayed both by parents and brethren and kinfolks and friends. And some of you shall they cause to be put to death. And you shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. But there shall not a hair of your head perish. In your patience you possess your beings. His own too, beginning with verse 9. I know your works in tribulation and poverty, but you're rich. Poverty in the things of the world probably, but in Yah we're rich. And I know the blasphemy of them who say they are who they are not. They are not, but they are the synagogue of Hasatan. Fear none of those things that you shall suffer. Behold, the evil one shall throw some of you into prison, that you may be tried, and you shall have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful to death, and I will give you a crown of life. He that hath an ear, let him hear what YAHUAH says to the assemblies. He that overcomes shall not be hurt of the second death. It's time for us, brothers and sisters, to stop trying to see the best in people and trying to choose to see what they are showing. And we got to start choosing to see what they're showing us. Stop trying to see the best in them. See what they're showing us. People show us who they are all the time. Yet religion has taught us to love our enemies and turn the other cheek and second guess ourselves. This teaching has kept people bound. And there's a wisdom in everything. Matthew 10, I'm going to repeat it. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the council, and they will scourge you in their temples, in their synagogues. And ye shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. So you ask, so whatever happened to Abram, right? Now let's go back to that, and let's see. The last we heard, they were presented before the people in just their undergarments. So we're back in Jasher 12. And YAHUAH loved Abram, and he had compassion over him. And YAHUAH came down and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. But all the cords they bound him with were burned, while Abram remained and walked about in the fire. I have always thought, after I heard this story a few years ago, after I read it, I said, I believe that encouraged the three Hebrew brothers. They knew their father Abram, or Abraham at that time, had experienced the same plight, and yet Yah was with him. And Haran died when they threw him into the fire. He was burned to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with Yahuwah. Oh my, that heart. There we go with the heart again. Yah sees our hearts. And the Almighty One and those who threw him into the fire, the flame of the fire spread over them. So let me read that again. And Haran died when they threw him into the fire. He was burned to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with Yahuwah, the Almighty One. And those men who threw him into the fire, the flame of the fire spread over them, and they were burned. And 12 men of them died. Very familiar, right? And Abram walked in the midst of the fire 3 days and 3 nights, and all the servants of the king saw him walking in the fire. And they came and told the king, saying, Behold, we have seen Abram walking about in the midst of the fire. Even the lower garments that are upon him are not burned, but the cord that he was burned, tied in, is burned. Another familiar part. And when the king heard their words, his heart fainted, and he would not believe them. So he sent other faithful princes to see this matter. And they went and saw it and told it to the king. And the king rose to go and see it, and saw Abram walking to and fro in the midst of the fire. And he saw Haran's body burned, and the king wondered greatly. And the king ordered Abram to be taken out from the fire. And his servants approached to take him out, and they could not, for the fire was round about, and the flame ascending toward them from the furnace. And the king's servant fled from it. And the king rebuked them, saying, Make haste and bring Abram out of the fire, that you shall not die. And the servants of the king again approached to bring Abram out. And the flames came upon them and burned their faces, so that 8 of them died. And when the king saw that his servants could not approach the fire, lest they should be burned, the king called to Abram, O servant of the Almighty One, who is in the Shamayim, go forth from amidst the fire and come here before me. He said, I can't keep losing people. You come on out. And Abram hearkened to the voice of the king, and he went forth from the fire and came and stood before the king. And when Abram came out, the king and all his servants saw Abram coming before the king with his lower garments upon him, for they were not burned. But the cord that he was bound with was burned. All praises to the Most High. He was like, you ain't going to be walking around here bound. Can't no man bind you. So y'all had those cords. Isn't that something? And the king said to Abram, How is it that you weren't burned in the fire? And Abram said to the king, The Almighty One, the Shamayim, and Aretz, in whom I trust, and who has all power. All is in his power. He delivered me from the fire that you threw me in. And Haran, the brother Abram, was burnt to ashes, and they sought for his body, and they found it consumed. And Haran was 82 years old when he died in the fire cast him. And the king, princesses, and inhabitants of the land, seeing that Abram was delivered from the fire, they came and bowed down to Abram. And Abram said to them, Do not bow down to me, but bow down to the Almighty One, of whom made you, and serve him, and go in his ways. For it is he who delivered me from out of this fire, and it is he who created the souls and spirits of all men, and formed man in his mother's womb, and brought him forth into the world. And it is he who will deliver those who trust him from all pain. Oh, my. Thank you, Father. And this thing seemed very wonderful in the eyes of the king and princes, and Abram was saved from the fire, and the Aram was burned. And the king gave Abram many presents, and gave him his 2 head servants from the king's house. The name of one was Oni, and the other name was Eleazar. Remember Eleazar? He was the one that he sent to get Rebekah for Isaac years later. And all the kings, princes, and servants gave Abram many gifts of silver and gold and pearl. And the king and his princes sent him away, and he went in peace. Remember what the 3 brothers They were already in high positions, and when they were delivered from the fire, the king gave them even higher positions. And Abram returned on that day and went to his father's house, he and the men that followed him. And Abram served the Almighty One, his Yahuwah, all the days of his life. And he walked in Yahuwah's ways and followed his law. Of course, we don't know all that has been translated correctly and what all was purposely not written, taken out, or written erroneously. But the account that we have on Yahushua, and we do, I believe, as much as I can believe of it, that he was tortured, he was treated badly the night that he was arrested. And so Yahushua says in Matthew 10, 24, the disciple is not above his servant, nor the servant above his master. So we know that whatever he went through, and remember, and then there's verses that say that, like one says, and I think 2 Timothy, in order to reign with him, we're going to have to suffer with him. And another one says, not sure the passage, but he says that if we're going to live a set apart life, we ought to expect to be persecuted, to live in a life of persecution. So we need to be expecting that to happen. So the disciple or the student is not above his teacher, nor the servant above his master. It is enough for the disciple that he be as his teacher and the servant as his master. If they have called the master of their house Beelzebul, how much more shall they call them of his household? Fear them not, therefore, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hid that shall not be known. What I tell you in darkness, that speak in light, and what you hear in the ear, that preach upon the housetops. And fear not them who kill the body, but are not able to kill the being, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and being in hell. Are not two Pharaohs sold for a farthing, and one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father knowing? But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear you not, therefore, you are of much more value than many sparrows. Whosoever therefore shall confess me before men, him will I confess before my Father who is in the Hashamayim. Whoever shall deny me before men, him shall I also deny before my Father who is in the Shamayim. Think not that I am come to send peace on the Aretz. I came not to send peace, but sword. For I came to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her daughter, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes shall be they of his own household. He that loves mother or father more than me is not worthy of me. And he that loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that takes not up his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He that finds his life shall lose, and he that loses his life for my sake shall find it. He that receives you, receives me. And he that receives me, receives him that sent me. There's a audio on We Win titled, To Die is Gain, to Deny is Death. Hopefully you'll hear that. I'll put a link in the description. But they're going to be betraying us, turning us in, thinking that they're doing y'all a favor. Some of them, I know they're not doing y'all favors. Hatred for Yahuwah is why they're doing it. He said, beware, men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in their synagogues. And remember that misquote about blood thicker than water. That's not it. It is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Family members do not necessarily mean friendship, kinship, and covenant. We have to know by what people show us. Stop feeling guilty. If you see something that's true and you feel that the right thing to do is to see the best in them, we better see what's right. Do we not know that there's two seeds? There's a serpent seed And there's those who are following Yahuwah. And there's some that are in his kingdom that offend. And in the end, when he comes, he's going to send a messenger to take those out that offend, that are in the kingdom. Don't let ignorance be our downfall into being betrayed. We're going to have enough going on. Oh my. Matthew YAHUAH 12, verse 46. While Yahushua talked to the people, behold, his mother and his brethren stood without, desiring to speak with him. Then one said unto him, behold, your mother and your brethren stand without, desiring to speak with you. But he answered and said to him that told him that, who is my mother, and who are my brethren? And he stretched forth his hand toward his disciples, his taught ones, his Talmudim, and said, behold, my mother and my brethren. For whoever will do the will of my Father, who is in Shamayim, the same is my mother, sister, and brother. This is something to think about, something to seriously consider. It's a real grave thought, but we got to think about it. And we can't love anybody more than we love Father. If they don't love Father, then they don't love us. And that means they're our enemy. Detach from the worldly relationships. When all this is going to pass away and be gone, we're not even going to remember these people that we just love so much. He said, have none other before him. Doesn't matter, we gave birth to them. We were the vessel in which they came into the earth. But they still had to make a decision. And people are suffering now based on a decision they made from following people. This has been, I think, I'm only 70. Well, I'll be 70 in a few weeks. And so I don't know a lot. I have not lived forever and ever. But from the little I know in the years I have lived, I've never seen such division in this country. Of course, I wasn't here during the Civil War. That was a time of division. But there's so much division now. It started in 2020 when people started being divided in whether or not they should partake in a medical decision or not. You know, and now we have this political thing that has divided us. And there's so many things that are dividing us. About 2 or 3 years ago, right, a well-known religious sect in this country split up because they couldn't agree on abortion, same-sex, and some other things. And so there's a lot of division today. We have to always side with Yahuwah and his word. Things are going to pass with fervent heat. We want the word in us. The word is the only thing that's not going to pass. So just wanted to bring this forth and let you see this father. He betrayed 2 of his sons. He chose to side with the king, an earthly king, a man, and his mighty ones who couldn't even defend themselves against a human with a hatchet. But how many people are not choosing right now? Are they not choosing other things over truth? The riches, the wealth, the name, the fame, the certain neighborhood, the certain car, the certain position. They're choosing all these things. Let's not be deceived. He said, be not deceived. That's one of the things he said in Matthew YAHUAH 24, Luke 13, and Lucas 21. When they asked him, what are going to be the signs of your return? The first thing he said in all 3 of those chapters was, be not deceived. Let no man lead you astray. Beware of men, he said. What does that mean, beware? That means know them. Know them, right? Know them. It's a very, very grave, sad time, but yet victorious and uplifting also because we know we're getting ready to see the works of Yahuwah. Let's side with him in everything. It's his word. It's his word. And if we read something that doesn't seem, we wonder, is this right? All we got to do is talk to him and ask him. He's faithful. He said, if we seek him with all our heart, we'll be found of him. He'll be found of us. We will find him. He will allow us to find him. He will present us with truth. One day you'll be reading that same verse and, okay, revelation will come. So brothers and sisters, let's be encouraged. Let's side with the Almighty One, the self-existent one, the one that always was and always will be, the Ancient of Days, the King of Kings. He's the sovereign one. He's the most sovereign one. So be encouraged. Be encouraged by his word. His word gives us hope. His word gives us life. Let's side with him. Let's practice being courageous, resisting fear, mastering fear. Because fear is real. He'll show up. He's a spirit. But we've been told that we've not been given. I'm going to get it out, evil one. We have not been given the spirit of fear, but we've been given the spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind through YAHUAH. We win in Yah. We win in Yah. Even if they think they win when they take some of our lives, we win. We win. And we're going to have to tighten things up. Oh my, we, meaning me too. We don't want to be like Haran. Not sure. I'm just going to see what Yah does to see if we're going to side with him or not. He's already done enough to have convinced us that he is who he is. Brothers and sisters, be encouraged and stay encouraged. And may Yah allow us to be with others that are truly of one mind and one accord, to be an encouraging one another. But if not, we know there's more. Elijah thought he was by himself, and the master told him, I got 7,000 others who have not bowed to false prophets, fearing Ahab and Jezebel. So we're not alone. And most of all, we know we're not alone because he said he's always with us. Always with us. You know, that brings up something. You know, in Matthew 27, verse 46, when they say that he's saying, Eli, Eli, sabachthani, that he's saying, why have you forsaken me? And I've told you on other audios, that's not what he said. He said, what I've done is for the Sabbath keepers. Because look at sabachthani. Doesn't it sound like Sabbath? So I was reading just recently and saw in YAHUAH 16 verse 32 that he was talking to Tamani, and he says that, you know, I'm getting ready to leave. You're crying because I'm about to leave, but you're going to see me again, and I'm going to be alone because you're going to all flee. He said, but I'm not alone because the Father is with me. I said, see, that cancels out. Because I've always thought that. I said, why would he? I shouldn't say I have not always thought that. There was a time I did believe what I read. But then the time came when I saw that, and I was like, why would he leave him? He walked uprightly before him all the days of his life here on earth. But then we're going to believe he won't leave us? Who we keep faltering? So I believe that he did not leave him. It was because he was with him that he was strong enough to go through all that he went through. So we can know that he's with us. We see it with Abram right then. He was with him. We saw it with Azariah and Hananiah and Meshi. Well, one translation calls him Chantaniah. So I don't know what his I guess it depends on how they translate it. But those three Hebrew men, they were not boys, they were men, young men who stood up. He was with them. And he tells us in YAHUAH 43, I think he said, if you go in the water, I'm with you. Fire, I'm with you. So he's going to be with us. He's going to be with us. But he's with us now. But he's not a coward to run and leave us if we stand for him. Why would he leave us? That's how he would. Do we really think that's how he would honor us standing up for him to leave us? No, he will not leave us. He's with us until the end. I don't know where that verse is either, but it's in Matthew, maybe 28, maybe Matthew 28. I'll see if I can find it. Even until the end of the age, I think is what it says. But he's not going to leave us. He's not going to leave us. When we're going through standing for him, he's not going to leave us. So yeah, he says, the last part of verse 20, Matthew 28, verse 20, the last part he says, and see, I am with you always until the end of the age. Ashe. Brothers and sisters, we are not alone. And if we prepare ourselves for it, we won't even be hurt when they betray us. Abram didn't seem hurt. You know? When we know who we side with, when we know of a fact that he fights for us, he stands up for us, and he's going to confess us before his Father because we confessed him before men. How can we lose? We're with the Almighty. Until next time, brothers and sisters, start girding yourselves up. Start girding ourselves up that we're going to be betrayed. Somebody's going to be betrayed. Start knowing people for what they are. And y'all give your wisdom how to still deal with them all the time knowing. I think that's painful. I think that's painful while still living and seeing the people. Because I've kind of experienced that. And it's kind of, and it is kind of amazing to think that it could be so. But I believe he'll even tell us who will betray us. Paul said at one point, one of the Thessalonians, there was some that were with them, but they left. He said, you know, had they been of us, they would have remained with us. We know Yahushua was betrayed by one of the 12. With him 3.5 years. So let's start preparing ourselves and let's start seeing people what they are. Remember, when we make it, we're not taking nobody with us. We're not vouching for nobody. Hey, can he come in too? He's always treated me really good. He's a good guy. She's a wonderful person. We're not bringing nobody with us. The 10 could not bring the other 5 and vouch for them. They were not ready. They were not ready to meet the bridegroom. We cannot vouch for anybody. We didn't come in the world with anybody. We're not leaving with anybody. So start preparing now and seeing. And just be wise with it. You don't have to tell people, you're going to betray me, aren't you? Because y'all may show you. Y'all may show you some of the people. And that's because he's trusting you to trust him with it. He'll give you wisdom. He'll give us wisdom. I'm in this too. He'll give us wisdom. And it will hurt. It will hurt as you're watching these people and they're talking to you and laughing. No time you know. What do we think Yahushua went through? Every day looking at Judas, talking to him, knowing who he was, his part in all of this. Remember, we're not greater than the master. We're not greater than the teacher. We're going to be betrayed. I used to know a man that he would say, sad but true. So we have this time to start preparing and and just realize that they made their choice. And we're on the winning side. Until next time, brothers and sisters, stay with Yah, grow in Yah, and know that we win in Yah.